This program is rated for all audiences. Please enjoy this feature presentation of the Crooked River Radio Network. This program is rated for all audiences.
The Nanosecond podcast is sponsored by CrookedRiverRadio.com. Crooked River Radio is an internet radio station that is live 24/7 playing rock and adult contemporary top 40 hits from the 60s through the 90s. You can find us on Live 365, Simple Radio, Roku, Radio Garden, and even Alexa, as well as our website. Come on and join us on the Crooked River.
Welcome to the Nanosecond podcast. With your hosts, Erik Nannarone, Nick Goglioni, and Pat Morrow. Interesting topics, intriguing conversation, and entertainment. Erik, Nick, and Pat will be right with you.
Hello and welcome to the Nanosecond podcast. I'm Erik.
And I'm Pat, I think.
Oh, do we have a good show for you today?
Here we go with that again.
I know.
Every time, Erik. What is up with, you're a creature of habit. That's what you are, buddy.
Yeah, I know. Didn't I say I'm not going to say that from now on last week? But here I am.
Yeah, and the week before that, and the week before that, and the week before that. What do you think of this, Barry? This guy's something else, ain't he?
I'm not sure what to think.
Okay.
Well, give it another minute or two. He'll grow on you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Erik, introduce our guest, Erik.
Okay. Today, we have Barry Shuck. How do you say your last name?
Shuck oysters.
Okay, Shuck. Sorry, I probably should have asked you that before.
It's all right. It's a German name.
Okay. So we have Barry Shuck from dogsbynature.com, which is a Cleveland Browns blog. How you doing tonight, Barry?
I am doing well. We're the second day of free agency and the tampering period, and everything will be official tomorrow. And it's an exciting time. I wish my name was being inked to one of those $28 million contracts, but life goes on.
Oh yeah, I think we all do. We all wish that we were being linked to that much money. But so before we get into Browns and NFL, let's just quickly talk about the XFL. What do you think of quality of play and the rules?
Well, the rules, the NFL has a working relationship with the XFL. Unlike the USFL and all the other leagues, the spring leagues that came up, they've got a working relationship that they can try out and train officials and also people on the sidelines and coaches and assistant coaches, and also rules and rule adaptations, like the onside kick. The AAF had a rule that instead of the onside kick, that you could have a 4th and 12 from your own 25. And if you made it, you could get the ball and continue it on. Where the XFL has adopted that same rule. And I saw a game where a team was down by 15 points. They scored a touchdown. They went for 3 on the extra point, which made them have 9. They kicked the field, and then they went for the onside kick and got it, went down and scored a touchdown and won the game by 2 points. And I think that's a good idea. I think eventually the NFL is just going to do away with kickoffs. What's y'all's feelings?
I think it would be a good thing to do the make it 4th and 15 from that team's 35-yard line. That would be perfect.
They have it as a 25 because it has to be more of a gamble than 35-yard line.
Okay.
So that's why they have it that way.
Also, I think the kickoff rule in the XFL should be implemented in the NFL because the it makes it safer, um, and that will bring the kick return back into the game in the NFL. Because
Yeah,
I think that it kind of takes away the kick return by the rules now.
yeah. If you notice though, in the XFL, the return guy gets the ball either in the goal line, maybe a +2 in the end zone, maybe a -2 on the field of play. He gets the ball about where his blockers end up being. So it's a plus yardage from the NFL because the NFL usually start about the 25. But in the XFL, they start about the 30, 32, 33-yard line. I haven't seen anybody break one yet. Have you?
No, I
Okay.
mean, it, bigger returns, yes, but actually for a touchdown, no.
Yeah. And,
Um,
and another
so
thing, next time you watch an XFL game and next time you watch a kicker, put the put the TV on mute. Okay.
mhm.
As soon as the return guy catches the ball, make this sound. Zzz. It looks just like electric football.
Ah,
It does.
okay.
All of a sudden, in electric football, you flip a switch, and everybody goes, zzz, and everybody darts around. That's exactly the way an XFL kickoff looks like.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I just had it by mistake. I had muted it for whatever reason. Somebody was talking in the room, and I was looking at the TV, and I said, "Wow, that's just like electric football." But it's gonna stop a lot of injuries. I got granted in high school I was in all special teams, and kickoffs are great. You just ran down on there and hit somebody, but
Don't you
it's
think,
not gonna
though? Don't you think that it's kind of sissifying it to take
be
the?
kind of what.
It's kind of sissifying the play. You know,
Um,
I'm
I
used.
I think
You got to
I think
understand. I'm 50 or I'm 68 years old, and I've been following not only the Browns but the NFL since 1964.
right.
And back then, the football was football. You heard people getting cracked. It was just after the helmets actually came out. You heard people grunting and everything, and it was a manly sport. Now,
Yeah.
what they've seemed to have done in the past few years is they're sissifying it.
Well, I have a friend of mine that played for FSU. He was their long snapper for 2 years. He told me they never tackled ever in practice, ever, ever, ever. They never tackled each other in high school. If Erik was the safety and every day I had to prove to him that I was a better defender than I was, and every day he had to prove that he was a better defender than I was. He had to prove he could hit harder, and I had to prove that I could hit harder. That doesn't happen. And in the NFL, they don't tackle each other either. They tackle these little drone cushion bots, ones that they can, use by remote control, that cost about $50,000 a piece, and they just don't they just don't tackle anymore. So for you to say, it's sissifying it, who runs the world? Y'all answer me that. Who runs the world?
Uh, I'm not sure where you're going with this.
Attorneys. Attorneys run
Attorneys.
the
Yeah,
world.
that's true too.
Yeah. So when you get attorneys involved, attorneys say, don't do this. You got to do this. Don't try this. Start doing this. They have you ever seen a modern helmet? There's about 4 versions of it. They're just incredible. When I played in high school, it was a web in the top of the helmet, and it was
Yep.
2 foam pieces under the ear, and that was it. And a chin strap, and it didn't have any padding at all. The helmets today, once you put it on, they put the foam in there to form the player's head so that there aren't any loose spots. There isn't any rattling of the head. And because attorneys say, look, this CTE, this is a for real thing. Part of being with dogsbynature.com is I interview former players and I ask questions about that. I just did an interview with Leroy Horde and I asked him about, you ever, been concussed in a game? You ever, and back in those days, you just say, rub some dirt on it and get back in the game.
That's the way it was for a long time.
Did you do anything on player safety during the Damar Hamlin thing? Like,
No,
did
I didn't even touch that. I didn't deal with that at all. I was dealing with what was going on with the Browns. I know Hamlin passed away. I did an article years and years and years ago about a guy that actually died on the field. 1974, he played for the Detroit Lions. He actually passed away on the field. They picked him up. They carted him off. There was a minute 18 left. They played the end of the game, and that was the end of it. So um, I did bring that story back to the fold, but I didn't do anything on Hamlet at all.
the reason I ask, we had a guy who did extensive research on, who used to be a work for disability, like deal with disability claims,
Okay.
and he's also a local radio host. He he did extensive research into the lack of benefits the players get, and it was very eye opening. These guys get nothing. Like Damar Hamlin was only in the league for 2 years. I mean, luckily he's still alive and everything, but he's not, that injury that ended his career. He doesn't get a pension because he's not vested till 3.5 years in.
Right.
And the league has a right, even if a former player files through the government for disability, and they get it, the league can go back and be like, sorry, no, you're not getting this.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, they're football players. Nobody makes them play football. Nobody makes them choose that as their profession. They can do anything they want, but they choose to play football. And part of the reason is because of the money they can make. So when they go into it, they know what the risk is. And every level that you go up, if you go from high school to say D3 or D2, that's a big step than playing D1.
mm-hmm.
If you're playing in the SEC or you're playing in the Big Ten, that's a big step than playing for a community college in Mississippi or Arizona or D2 or D3. Um, that's extreme. And then when you go from there, you go to the NFL, it's a different level. One of my questions to former players is, what's the biggest difference from college to the NFL? And most of them say the speed, the violence, the hitting. One offensive tackle told me, he said, look, 11 games in college, I dominated everybody but 3 defensive ends. But in the NFL, the guy in front of you is just as good or better than you. And then his backup that comes in is just as good or better than you. So that's the difference between playing college. If Ohio State is playing New Mexico State versus they're playing Penn State or Michigan or Georgia or Alabama, it's a completely different game. If you're a wide receiver and you get 182 yards and 4 touchdowns against New Mexico State, it's like Emmitt Smith. His greatest game was 325 yards against New Mexico State when he was a junior at Florida. Well, you look at it and say, wow, 325 yards. Well, yeah, it's always not not your schedule, but it's who you play.
Okay. I mean, though, but it would be like workman's comp, though. Like, wouldn't it, that they should at least, since they got hurt on the job, shouldn't they get paid something? Because it's workman's comp. Well,
Yeah,
in the real world, it would be workman's comp. I don't know
I
why.
I, I don't have an answer for that.
You would
That's
think
for
you would think that they would do more with with insurance and stuff like that, especially for these first 5 year players. You
Yeah,
don't really get anything until you've been in the league 5 years, according
yeah.
to what
I
the
did an
research you
interview
did.
with Dan Fike. He was an offensive guard for the Browns in the
Yeah, I
80s.
remember him. I remember
Yeah,
him.
he was a 10th round pick of the Jets. He didn't want to be on practice squad. He ended up playing the USFL with Steve Spurrier at Tampa Bay. He was there for 2 years. They went to the playoffs every year. Then he got signed with the Browns. He told me that he gets 1,100 a month from the NFL. He's had 7 knee surgeries, 2 back surgeries. He's got a hip replacement, and he can barely walk. He came to a Browns backers function that I was at, and he doesn't use a cane. He doesn't use a walker, but he's very gingerly. And he just told me about all these surgeries, and it happened because of playing professional football. And that's just the way it is. He gets 1,100 a month pension from the NFL, and he played, I think, 8 years in the NFL and 2 years in the USFL. Um, it's not. He said all the pain that he goes through and all the pain medication that he's on.
It it's crazy. I mean, there was a documentary that came out a few years ago on Mike Webster, the
Yeah.
former center of the Steelers,
Yep.
and how bad he was, and his family. They mostly told too bad. The league mostly said too bad. We're not doing anything for you, and by like there was a lawsuit a couple years after he died, and the league wouldn't let them get involved.
Yeah. He ended up living in his car for a while.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, but there are different errors, ERA about professional football players, and the players that are playing now and that are in the teens and the 20 are going to be taken care of differently than Dan Fike, who played in the 80s,
Hmm.
or somebody that played in the 70s, or somebody that played in the 50s. And they're just completely different situations. I interviewed Whitey Tittle one time. I said, "How much was the most you ever made in a contract?" He said, "Well, the rookies made the least. The longer you played, you made the most, even if you weren't playing." He said, "I made 69,000. That's how much he made his 19th year playing in the NFL.
Wow.
69,000 is not even a workout bonus in today's contracts."
Wow.
Was that back in the time where most of the players had second
Second,
or like had jobs in the off
yeah,
season?
yeah. In fact, you can Google Whitey Tittle Insurance. It's in Palo Alto, California. He started that when he played for the San Francisco 49ers before he was traded to the Giants. And he sold insurance in the off season. Then he had insurance agents that sold during the season. And he did that up until the time he died. His son now runs the agency. But everybody, Vince Lombardi, when he was the offensive coordinator of the New York Giants in 1957 and 1958, he worked for a bank in New York. In fact, he had been turned down for the head coach of the Army, and that's what he wanted more than anything. And he thought about going into banking full time, and the Giants owner, Wellington Mara, said, "No, concentrate on football, and I'll help you as far as getting a better opportunity to coach." And 1957, he was offered the Eagles head coach, and he turned that down. In 1958, they loaned him to the Green Bay Packers because he had 2 years left on his contract. And then the next year, 1959, when their head coach decided Jim Lee Howe to step down. They called the Packers, said, "Okay, we're ready for Vince to come back." And their GM said, "Nope, we're keeping him." And so that's how he stayed in Green Bay. But he was a banker, one of the greatest coaches ever, and he almost went into banking.
I know my mother used to work on Euclid Avenue back in the late 50s, and
Okay.
she'd get a lot of Browns players in, and they were all
Yeah.
working part-time jobs. One was driving a cab, the
Yeah.
others were working down. I don't know if you know that area or not. It's
Yeah. Yeah. Certainly.
remember where the Charter House used to be, where
Hmm.
My mother worked at the Charter House, the Red Coach, or the Red. I think it was a
Yeah.
Red Rib Room. She was a hostess in there, and she was a waitress and everything. But she used to tell me all the time about this player coming in, and he was driving a cab. This guy was
Yeah.
working for Neela Park. This guy was over there at General Electric, and they all had different jobs. And what the football stuff was like a hobby, and
Yeah.
they were
And,
getting
and
paid
it,
about that.
yeah, it paid better than average wages while they were playing. But unfortunately, it was, however many games it was, because you think about back in Jim Brown's day, they only played 12 games.
Yep.
So,
Anyway, let's modernize this talk a little bit.
all right, let's do it.
Let's start talking
One more
some.
question. One before we go to Browns. One more question or statement. It seems like there's so many naysayers on the XFL, but somehow they're getting better views than like NHL on ESPN and stuff. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me. How there's all these naysayers or people who doubt the XFL, but they're getting more views, like I said, than hockey.
Yeah. Well, you got to understand what the XFL is. The XFL is a league comprised of players that were not playing, that were not under an NFL contract or a CFL contract. The NFL pays the most, the CFL pays the second most. Then you've got a ton of indoor leagues. I think there's 7 indoor leagues, and teams jump from league to league constantly. But the USFL and the XFL, and when the AAF was in business, all of those are non-rival NFL leagues. So you take the AAFC in the 1940s, where the Browns came from, the USFL, the American Football League, all of those were rival leagues, which means that they could sign NFL players, they could sign NFL coaches and scouts and front office people, and they stole those people, and they did. But all of these leagues, the XFL and the USFL, are they do not have individual owners; they're league-owned teams, and they're not an NFL rival league. So what they are considered as a developmental league. So this guy is playing quarterback for the Seattle Dragons. 2 months ago, he was selling real estate. This other guy for San Antonio, he was a high school football and weightlifting coach. Now he's playing in the XFL. So none of these players were playing in the NFL. They weren't on a practice squad. They weren't on IR. They weren't like the Browns signed Chris Odoms, the USFL's a defensive MVP. We got hurt. He was spent the entire season on IR. Now he's a free agent. He can sign with anybody. Basically, he got a 1-year contract and made some money. But these leagues are developmental leagues, and they all signed 1-year contracts. They get a stipend every day. They get room and board. They get a place to live. Now, something you may not know about the XFL is during the week, all of those players are in Dallas, Texas. They're all in hotels in Dallas, Texas. And then the day before their game, they fly to whichever stadium it is. So if you play for the DC Defenders, you're in a hotel in Dallas, Texas, and you got a game on Sunday. On Saturday, you fly to Washington, then you stay in a hotel, then you play your game on Sunday, then you fly back to Dallas. They all practice at high school and junior college and college stadiums. One practices at a park, just a regular park that's got a football field layout in. The only reason I know this is I know the kicker for the DC Defenders named Matt McCrane. He was in practice squad with the Browns. He almost kicked one game. I am friends with their family. I did an interview with Matt, and his dad told me the whole scoop about that. They're paid by the week. I think they make $22.50 a week or $2,500 a week. quarterbacks make a little bit more. But all these players are developmental. They didn't have jobs in the NFL. They didn't have a futures contract. They weren't in the CFL playing. See, the CFL starts their season June, July, and then ends in November sometime. None of them had a CFL contract. None of them had an NFL contract. None of them were in practice squad. So these guys were not playing football. They still want to play football and they still want to be invited to all those leagues. So what that means is that the XFL talent level is what it is. And that's a bunch of guys that weren't playing football that are being melded together. Now, do they have opportunities to go? Sure. The return guy for the Dallas Cowboys last year was the USFL's most valuable player. He played with the Cowboys all year, but a lot of these players will get invited to camps. Whether they make the rosters or not is a different animal.
Don't you think that eventually, at least that's the way it seems to us. I've watched, like in baseball, you've watched the development of the farm teams and that. Don't you think?
Right.
Don't you think the league could head to something like that, and it'd be profitable for them?
They already have a farm league. It's called college football.
Yeah, that's true too.
They don't pay anything for it. They've had two farm leagues. In the 1960s, they had the Continental Football League, and it had teams in Texas and Florida, and that ran for 8 years, and it hemorrhaged money. And the way that worked is, let's say the Orlando Panthers, 3 teams would send players to Orlando, and they would develop. And it played during the fall, so it played the same time as the NFL. Then there was the World League, which became NFL Europe, which became NFL Europa, and it hemorrhaged money. Now that's its biggest story was Kurt Warner, and it came out of that league, and a lot of players came out of that league. Emmitt Smith's brother Emery was a fullback at Clemson and played in the World League, but it costs money, and it costs too much money. They developed coaches, they developed assistant coaches, they developed referees. It was played in the springtime, so it didn't go against the NFL season, but it was the bottom third of everybody's roster. So if you were a starting player at all, they did not assign you to the World League. And the same thing, if you take the Frankfurt Galaxy, 3 teams would send players to them. If you were with the Rhine Fire or the Scottish Claymores, 3 teams would send their players to that, and they would play and develop and get competition instead of just being scout team players during the week or practice squad players that practice and never played an actual game. But the bottom line was both these leagues cost the NFL a lot of money. The NFL is made up of billionaires, and billionaires know how to do one thing: make money. So when you bring them an idea of how to lose money, the last thing they're going to do is give that to any thought. They've got college football. College football trains all these guys, and they'll never have a farm system ever.
I can see where you're coming from there.
When it comes to the XFL, one more question about the XFL, then we'll move on to the NFL. Do you think they give too much access on TV? Whether it's interviewing players right on the spot after a big play one way or the other, or having the coaches mic'd up so you can hear them giving the play call. Do you think that's too much access? Or do you think for a league like that, they need to give that for it to last?
Yeah, I agree 100%, Eric. For one, if you've got a league it's competitive, why in the world? Think about if this was the NFL. You've got the San Antonio coach, offensive coordinator, telling the quarterback to play, and us as a TV viewer, we hear that. Then the Orlando defensive coordinator, he's giving his plays. If that was the NFL, wouldn't there be somebody that would grab that play and then send it to the sideline, who would then send it to the linebacker, and then they would know exactly what was running?
Thank you. I say that all the time.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
of course
just,
they
it's
would.
crazy.
But
Yeah.
with the XFL, you say this is a competitive league. Well, they're telling us offensively and defensively what both teams are going to run. Now, I don't like how they show the coordinators at the same time because they're both talking. Then they minimize the screen, and what you're watching is the game. And when you get the game smaller, so that you can see the offensive and defensive coordinator to the left and to the right, you're making the players smaller, which means you can't see the play. Another thing I don't like is here's a guy that just got a pick six. He goes into the end zone. He's got a visor on. He's got a helmet on. And a guy from the sideline or from the end of the end zone comes up, puts a microphone in it and says, how did you jump that route? And the guy is saying, and then he runs off. And we go, what?
And the also one of the big problems, they keep the mics hot at all points.
Oh, it's
So
terrible.
you can hear them
Yeah,
dropping F bombs left and right. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
how's that not an FCC violation there?
I think mainly because the games are broadcast predominantly on FX and ESPN2, and maybe the rules are different than if it was on broadcast. If it was on the four main broadcast stations, there would be something that you have to do, maybe a 7 second rule, a bleep. But even if you do a bleep, if you look at it and if you see the words or if you hear it, you pretty much say that in your mind what he has just been bleeped out. So it's almost the
You can
same.
read lips.
Yeah, yeah. It's like when I see it in print and they'll say F, then they put a bunch of stars and they put a G. Well, you know what that word is, and you say it in your mind, so it's almost like saying it for real. But another thing I don't like is I don't like all these interviews with the coach, interview with players while the game is going on. You
Mhm.
go over there and a guy has just scored a touchdown, and they go over there and ask some very simple questions. What were you thinking when you made that cut? Well, the linebacker did this and the safety did that, and I just don't like it. And then you ask the coach something, and he doesn't really tell you what's going on. He tells you what he thinks you ought to know without giving away too much.
Mhm.
And I just think it's too many interviews. It's just too much going on. And I just think that if they want to show something, show the last play in a replay like the NFL does.
P-
And it's just too much. Now, there are good things that come out of these leagues. 2001, the Skycam was invented with the
Yep.
first XFL. Well, now every college football stadium you go to, and every NFL stadium, and every CFL stadium has a sky cam, and that came out of the first XFL.
Yep. I
You
remember when they brought
also,
that in.
what do you think about the transparency though on the replay system for XFL?
I like that. I like that 100%. I like
Should the
everything
NFL
about
adopt that?
it. I like how they communicate. I like how they tell you. You can hear him talking with the head referee. Um, but if you notice, I'm not sure how that would pertain to the NFL because see, the XFL's got one game going on. And so
Hmm.
when they do replays, they're doing one game. Whereas in the NFL, at the 1 o'clock time slot, 12 o'clock Central, what do they got? 7, 8 games, six. And if you got one Central, you would have to have so many replay officials. I just think that the NFL, that's why it takes so long in the NFL because there's just so many games going on. Even in the afternoon, there could be 3 or 4 games, whereas the XFL has one game. That's all they got to worry about. They got one play that they're talking about. They got a couple of players, and they're looking at that one particular situation instead of 12 different situations. But I like the communication. I like how they talk back and forth and how they resolve, and they let the viewer see how it's resolved.
I've always
Yes.
thought that they should take and with these replays, the NFL should open that up a little bit and actually let people see how the decision's being made. That would explain an awful lot. Because you get a lot
Yeah,
of these calls that are just they're stupid, and everybody and their brother can tell that it was either a fumble or it wasn't. and
Yeah.
then they come back with a completely opposite
Yeah.
part of the
Well,
call.
look at the Super Bowl. If you ever talk to anybody the week after the Super Bowl, the first thing that y'all talked about was the holding call. You
Exactly.
didn't talk about the
Was it a
game.
holding call or
You
not?
talked about that holding call. And yeah, you're exactly right. I know in the minor leagues in baseball, anything that's controversial, they don't show on the big screen. They do not show it at all. But any good plays, they'll show a replay on the big board. And I think that's the way the NFL wants it. Is they don't want the audience to know how they came to the conclusion that they came to, and they don't want to be second guessed and it to be controversial.
If you're just joining us, we are here with Barry Shuck from the what's
Dogsbynature.com.
dogsbynature.com, and he's our guest tonight. Let's take and switch into the Browns a little bit now. You ready for this, Erik?
Yes, I was just about to ask one quick question, and then
Oh, here we go. Here we go with the one quick question again.
Go for it.
okay. What? This will be a good one because I'll try not to butcher his name. What do you think about the signing of Obadiah Okowankru?
Yeah, you did that pretty well.
I think I question whether that's signing for starter or if it's just quality backup. He's only got 8 NFL starts. He's still a young guy, but he's played in 50 games, but he's only started 8 games. He hasn't had a lot of tackles. He hasn't had a lot of sacks. He's 6'2". He's 256 pounds. And that sounds like Lawrence Taylor to me. Back in the 80s, that's exactly what you wanted your linebackers to be: 6'2", 6'3", 256. If he's going to be an edge rusher, which he is, and I don't think he's all that great at stopping the run, which is, what's the biggest problem with the Browns last year is everybody ran against us. Everybody. We made household names out of running backs left and right. Austin Eckler just asked for a trade. We're the ones that made him famous when he gained 238 yards against us. Nobody even heard of him until he played the Browns. And I think it's just a camp body, and maybe it's just depth. I doubt that he's starter material. Now, Dalvin Tomlinson, that's a completely different animal.
Yeah.
He'll start day one. Now, who start with him is probably Perry and Winfrey. I don't like Jordan Elliott, but apparently Jim Schwartz does, and Jim Schwartz relies. Here's Jim Schwartz's defense. He doesn't blitz much. His corners play man, and it depends on the front forward to provide all the pass rush. And he's done that repeatedly. Everywhere he was a DC or the head coach, he would take 2 guys and make superstars out of them. Well, we know we already got one superstar, Myles Garrett. So who's the other guy going to be? It's either going to be another defensive lineman, defensive end, or it's going to be one of the defensive tackles. It may be Winfrey. It may be Tomlinson coming in. But I think the new guy, Obo, he just looks like quality depth to me. I just kind of looked at it and went, okay, whatever.
The one thing I read on Tomlinson was that he probably will take the spot of the other Clowney. And what I've read on him, they say he's a little lost against the run, but they're thinking that when he will be a good placeholder when Garrett's trying to flush him out.
Thompson will play in the inside. He won't play on the outside.
The things that I had problems with and mind you, I had been a proponent of getting rid of that defensive coach and that Prefer as far as the special teams.
Yeah,
I think they've definitely upgraded there. What the heck was that guy's name, Erik?
Joe Woods.
Joe Woods. I had been a proponent of getting rid of him for about a year and a half because
you were in the majority.
Because of the simple fact was that team was not really responding to him. They were missing tackles all over the place, and
Yeah,
you could tell they were really playing uninspired football. What I
yeah,
want the coach to come in here and start kicking ass.
yeah,
That's what the Browns need right now. They've
yeah.
got they've got the
Schwartz will do
players.
that. Yeah,
They've got the
Schwartz will do that.
Go ahead.
What I didn't like about Woods is he played a 4-2-5 just about every game.
Yep.
And so what that does is that minimizes the linebackers. You know, your defensive linemen have to protect your linebackers, and not in a 4-2-5. It just left too many gaping holes open up the middle, and each side of the center on those gaps, and when you got a safety playing a linebacker position, it just it's completely different. And yeah, you're right about missing tackles. Now I'll tell you a player who was night and day on this season was Grant Delpit.
Yeah,
After the
I agree.
board game, I wrote an article. Is Grant Delpit a liability? I remember he was tackling shoulder pads. He was blaming people. He never tackled below the waist. Now we had the bye week, and after he came to the bye week, all of a sudden he's tackling legs, and he ended up being a great player going down down the pike. And I think that the new safety coach, Ephraim Banda, he's their new safety coach. He is going to completely redo that room, and I think you're going to see that Delpit is going to be a Pro Bowler this year. And another player that I see that's going to come to the forefront is that rookie free agent last year, D'Anthony Bell. The
Yeah.
dude is a hitter. He's raw. He came from a lower D1, a D2 program that won a national championship, West Florida, but he is a hitter and he's very coachable. So those coaching changes right there, along with special teams coach Prefer leaving, that's going to be completely game changing for the Browns going forward.
The pick for Prefer's replacement just absolutely thrills me. Bubba Ventrone. I've always
Yeah,
That guy had the number 2 or 3 defense in the or special teams in the league at points
for years.
for years, right? He
He was
knows
top
what the hell
five,
he's doing.
top five the last 3 years.
So let's bring that in. I'm all for that one.
Yeah, and if you look at special teams, really, we've only got a few areas of concern. One is Cade York.
Yeah,
Uh, Started out strong, had some issues. I mean, we lost the Chargers game because he missed 2 kicks. Um, he's missed extra points. He had 3 kicks blocked. So that is one area. The other area is the return game. Other than Donovan Peoples-Jones running it back. Now, Jerome Ford had a couple of good returns on kickoffs, but other than that, our return game is horrible. Our punt coverage team is good. Our kickoff coverage team is just so. Um, so as far as a new special teams guy coming in, is Jakeem Grant going to be the answer? I hope so. And when he was with the Bears, he was electric. He reminds me of Dave Meggett back in the day, or Josh Cribbs back in the day. Um, and I think he could be a game changer. Of course, he got hurt last year, and then we just kind of fumbled. Dimitri Felton wasn't the answer. Um, we thought Anthony Schwartz is his track guy, and he should be able to return kicks or punts at least, and he didn't do anything. That's another question. Why is he still on the roster?
who do you think they're going to pick up?
I was just about to ask you, what do you think about Felton and Schwartz making this team next year?
I don't even know why he's still on the team now. It's just every time you look at him, he's dropping a pass.
Who do you think
And-
they're going to pick up as far as wide receiver? You know they're
Um,
going to get one.
As far as in free agency,
Yeah,
yeah, I thought they were going to go after Jacoby, Myers from New England, but he signed with somebody else. So I really don't know who's and Lazard would have been a good pickup, but the Jets signed him today.
if you want to
And
read the rumor mill, OBJ's coming back.
no, that'd be a mistake. Well, he won't make it because look, he wants $20 million. We can't pay him and Amari Cooper both. And of course, he's not worth 20 million. I think ultimately, and if he wants 20 million, what he's saying is he'll settle on 16 million. But that's not who we want. Whoever we sign is looking at wide receiver 3.
Yeah.
Is that David Bell? Is that going to be Damian Davis? Is that going to be Anthony Schwartz? Demetric Felton? So far, it hasn't been any of those. So we're not looking for wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. We've got that.
Yeah.
So we're not going to pay. If they pay somebody 8 million to come in and be wide receiver 3, that's what my expectations are. And I think OBJ ultimately will sign a 1-year deal for about 8 to 10 million, and somebody will give him a flyer, and maybe he'll do well, and we'll just see.
I've heard
You,
rumors.
you also have Michael Woods too, the guy they drafted in the 6th round.
I've heard rumors that
Yeah, absolutely.
Dallas is looking at OBJ also.
Yeah. And in training camp, they really like Michael Woods. He got hurt, and we'll just see. They've got like 6 young wide receivers, and a lot of them played on were on the practice squad, and they've got a bunch of them. But somebody's got to come to the forefront. But they're not going to sign OBJ.
I hope not. The thing I had about him, he couldn't stay on his field to save his life. Even in that Super Bowl game, he played 3 plays. He did 2 really great plays, had a tremendous catch, and then the next play he was off. He was hobbling off the field again. How do you?
Yeah.
That's. I don't want to put $20 million on a player like that.
No, and to be fair, OBJ need to be on a team that throws the ball more than it runs. Well, the Browns are built to run.
Yeah,
So right from the start, with him and Jarvis and Hollywood Higgins, there's just only right now, as far as I know, there's only 1 football still per game, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So we just misused him. We didn't use him enough. I was there against the Steelers, his very last game, and I think he got 2 catches for 6 yards, and we just don't throw the ball. So why do we need all these high-powered, receivers? And our wide receiver 1's Amari Cooper, and we don't need a second wide receiver 1.
You think Hunt's gone?
Yeah, Hunt's gone. So is Dearness Johnson. Next year it'll be Chubb with Jerome Ford as his backup. I think that that they may draft a guy in the 5th, 6th round. John Kelly's still around. They haven't given up on him, and he's had flashes. He's had Dearness Johnson type flashes. I'd love to see Dearness go to a team that will use him. I'd like to see Kareem go to a team that'll use him, because the Browns did not.
Yeah, I agree with that. When they did put him in, he really didn't perform that well either.
He was a 3rd down guy, and
Yeah.
he just they just didn't use him enough. He needs to be in a system that they're going to give him the ball 25, 28 times a game and make him the feature back. Now, what I'm disappointed is before the trade deadline, we could have got a 3rd or 4th round pick for him, and now we might get a bag of footballs.
Yeah, if we're lucky.
If we're lucky.
What do you think of the coaching as far as, do you think they're going to do any altering with the play calling?
I was disappointed with that. I was hoping when they hired Bill Musgrave that Stefanski was going to say, "Hey, I'm going to hand it over to him." I think Van Pelt's another person that could call plays. I do a column. I watch every game and I take 2 pages of notes. I do a column after every game called Brownies and Frownies, and it talks about who played well, who didn't play well, and who played both good and had bad moments. And play calling always ends up in the Frownies. It's perplexing. We will play a team that's 29th against the run, and then we'll have 16 runs all game. I just don't understand if we're going to try to mow people down. If you Schottenheimer told you, I'm gonna run it down your throat, and he did, and that's what they did. They ran the ball. So you don't need pass catching tight ends. You don't need a bunch of wide receivers that are going to need a bunch of money because they're not going to get the catches. So if we're going to be a running team, let's be a running team. Let's don't say we're a running team and then we get to the 6 yard line and we throw it 3 out of 4 downs.
Yeah.
It sounds like they want to do run the offense that University of Tennessee runs. I don't know if you've watched any of their games.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I met their quarterback at the Senior Bowl. And I have a mock draft I do every year. I'd love to see him take Hendon Hooker in the 3rd round. He's a little bit older. He's 25 years old, but I would love to see the Browns select Hooker in the 3rd round and let him be groomed while Deshaun Watson ends his contract in 3-4 years. He's got the same skill set as Deshaun. He's a runner. He's fast. He knows how to. He's got a good touch pass. He can throw it a mile long. But yeah, that'd be great. We're not going to be a Tennessee offense because we're not going to throw the ball that much. We need our quarterback to scramble and gain yards, and we need to run the ball. All of our offensive linemen, the one trait that they have is they're all good run blockers. Now, some are not as good as far as pass blocking, but that's not what we hired it for.
I would like to. What do you think as far as Deshaun? You think hopefully he's going to do better this year? You think he's going to be back to his former self?
Let's hope so.
We're 27 years old now.
After he played that first game for us, which we won, I wrote a column that said we waited 11 games for this. He was horrible, and I think he was lukewarm the 6 games that he played. I thought Brissett was a really good quarterback for us all season long. There were many a game, like the second game Deshaun was back and the 4th game he was back, that I just said out loud, put Brissett in. Let him play the second half.
You know, when now all that controversy with Deshaun was going down, one of the things that we discussed in tremendous length here was what's going to happen if we've got 7 or 8 wins when Deshaun comes back in. And I've talked to several very well-known sports writers and they all said the same thing. It don't matter what the record's going to be. He's going to be in there because he's getting the bucks to do it.
Right.
And, if things would have been any different, I don't think that Brissett's an actual per se starting quarterback. I wouldn't put him in there for 16, 17 games. But he was decent. You can win with mediocrity if everything else backs you up. I mean, they've proved that. Hell, they proved that hundreds of times in the past with Bubby Brister.
Or Dilfer.
Or Trent Dilfer's another one.
Yeah. Dilfer won a Super Bowl. Jeff Hostetler won a Super Bowl.
You can win with mediocrity, but everything else has got to support you. And with the Browns, it never does. At least it seems that way.
The Browns definitely need to. They are definitely going to have to get a quarterback. Kellen Mond is our backup. Number one, he's a pocket passer, but number two, I don't think he's got any NFL starts. He's a developmental player. So if Deshaun Watson goes down, they've got to have a backup quarterback. The good thing about Baker Mayfield is while he was learning the offense, they had Casey Keenum, who Stefanski had ties to, and he had, I think, 64 NFL starts. So you got to have an experienced guy behind Deshaun Watson. I don't know who that's going to be at this time.
You don't think they'll keep Brissett? I don't really see him staying there anyway.
Say that again?
You don't think they'll keep Brissett?
No, I don't. I think Brissett's going to look for it's not because the Browns won't want him. I think they would. They signed him for a 1-year deal. I think it was $4.5 million for 1 year. They knew that they needed somebody to come in while Deshaun was on suspension. They didn't know how many games that suspension was, but they would love to have him back. But I think Brissett now that he's got a taste of what being a starter is for so long, he's going to look for an opportunity that he can compete for the starting job. He may not get it, but he wants to compete for the starting job because he looks at himself now as an NFL starting quarterback.
I kind of think he is too, to be honest. I've seen a lot worse that are starters,
Yeah,
and you know,
yeah, and if you find a guy that's injury prone, like I think if he went to Vegas would be a perfect situation because Vegas just signed Jimmy G, and I don't think Jimmy G's ever had a full season that he played all the games. He's hurt at some point, and then Brissett could come in, and who knows, he might even take the job away from him.
it'd be worth a shot. What else you got, Eric? You
Um,
you look like
what do
you're
you think
pacing back and forth.
um about a possible new stadium for the Browns? Or a dome stadium specifically? Do you think that's a good idea or just a waste of money for the city?
So if I was in leadership position with the Browns, the first thing I would look at is what will it cost to put a retractable roof on the stadium that we have now. I don't see anything wrong with the stadium. I don't see anything wrong with it at all. I think it was built with good ideas. It's skyboxes, and the dog pound has bleacher seats instead of seats with backs and armrests. I think that's a great idea. I don't see anything wrong with the stadium. It's up to date. It's modern. It's in a good place. Um, I don't know how much a dome would cost or retractable roof. I don't know why they didn't build it with a retractable roof. But if you notice, a lot of traditional northern teams have all built outdoor stadiums. Green Bay still has their original stadium, but even like Buffalo, when they built an outdoor stadium where the Giants and Jets play. When they were through with Giant Stadium, they built a brand new stadium without a lid on it. New England has built two or three stadiums without domes on top of it. Philadelphia, they had the old stadium, and now they've got a stadium that doesn't have a roof on it. Now, Minnesota does, Detroit does. So that kind of bucks the city. My brother lives in Indianapolis. I've been inside of that stadium. That stadium not only has a roof that opens, it's got an end that is like this, and then it just slides open and it brings air into it. And, but, they may have gotten cost of what a retractable dome lid would cost and to retrofit the existing stadium to that. And it may mean that with just a little bit more, they could just build a brand new stadium and be done with it.
But putting a dome on the stadium, you can get big concerts in the winter versus people don't want to come to the Q or the Rocket Mortgage Field House, whatever they call it now, because it's too small. You know, when they could come to Cleveland and have 80 plus thousand people because field seats and then actual stands.
Yeah.
Versus 24,000 at the cap for the arena. The big time people don't want to come here
Yeah.
and do that.
And not
So,
only that, there's other things like tractor pulls and monster truck races. There could be, you know, other like you take like a basketball. Look what the Cowboys arena does. They've got basketball tournaments and basketball stuff that goes on all the time in their stadium. So they're missing out on a lot. I got that, but I don't know what the numbers are to add a retractable roof versus building a brand new one. And if they built a brand new one, where exactly would that be? Would that be somewhere out in the country? Look, a lot of these teams don't even play in the city anymore. Dallas plays in Arlington. Let's see, the 49ers play in Santa Clara. The Los Angeles Rams and Chargers, they don't play in LA. the Giants play in a completely different state. So if they
Mhm.
built a stadium, would it be in Cleveland at all? Or would they do something that maybe it's between Cleveland and Dover where they can buy a bunch of land? It's just one interstate to get there. Then they can plan all this out. They have ample parking. People will travel. If you put a stadium in Akron, if you put a stadium, in Youngstown, look where their training facility is. It's not even in Cleveland.
Yeah, it's in Berea.
Yeah,
They're
it's
talking about Independence or Parma, I've heard. But
yes,
also, there's a couple part pieces of land downtown that they're talking about too. So the
and also,
Cleveland.
yeah, what is the land going to cost? If you're hush hush, like when Disney World was bought, they tried to put it in Northwest Florida, where the paper mill was, and the paper mill wouldn't sell any of the land because they've got like a jillion acres. And he thought the climate was better than South Florida. He thought South Florida was too hot. But then when they went down there, they had like over 800 transactions under different assumed names. So here's a parcel they bought under Mr. Brown. Here's another parcel they bought, Mr. Rivers. Here's the parcel they bought for the Mitchells. And then nobody knew that it was Disney that was buying all this. And so if you buy land out in the country, there's a lot more you can do with it. And you still call them the Cleveland Browns, all these other teams. I mean, look, the New York Giants haven't played in New York since I don't know, the 80s, the 70s. The Jets used to play in Shea Stadium before they moved out there. The New England Patriots don't play in Boston, and that's why they changed their name from Boston to New England, because they moved out of Boston and didn't want to call them Boston anymore. In fact, they named themselves the Bay State Patriots for 30 days till a newspaper article headlined, "The BS Patriots hired general manager." And they said, well, we're not going to be BS anymore. But if you go out in the country and you buy a bunch of land, it just seems to make a lot more sense. Your property values and taxes are going to be a lot less. You got more land than you know what to do with. Parking is ample. Getting in and getting out can be very simple if you do the right exits and do stuff, especially if it's near an interstate, which most everything is. Um, so, but it may be that a retractable roof on an existing stadium, maybe two-thirds, three-quarters what a brand new stadium would cost. So they may just look at that and say, well, we can get the stadium that we want because, these owners didn't build that stadium. They didn't have anything to do with it. And maybe their wants and likes and
Mhm.
dislikes are completely different. And maybe they want something that's 100,000, 110,000 rather than its size that it is. And with especially with technology changes all the time, there's always a better teapot and a better toaster and a better waffle maker, down the road than what's really at First Energy Stadium right now.
Well, supposedly, from what I heard, that they actually were talking about some property that was pretty much right next to the stadium. Cleveland's
Oh, I got
given,
along the river.
yeah, Cleveland's given them an issue about buying it. The other sites that they've talked about, one was in Independence. It was over here by Rockside Road, and
Yeah,
there's a lot of land over there. That'd be a good place for them, I think. But
yeah,
the simple
Then
fact of it is that stadium was built in 1998, 7 and 98. So it's what,
right.
25 years old. And I think it's had a modernization here and there over the
Yeah,
past years. But from what somebody told me, is the average life of a football stadium anymore is about 25 years. So
yeah.
that's
Let me ask you one thing: if they had built this stadium not in 1988, but in 1993 or 1994, would Modell have ever moved into Baltimore?
probably because he wasn't getting along with Cleveland at all. I lived through all that and watched.
Yeah,
I watched Mike
White.
Mike White take and show the press the stack of the agreement that Modell had agreed upon, taking it to the office and laying it by the door, and then the Browns were gone. You know, there was no love lost there whatsoever,
yeah,
and that was that way the whole time after he pulled the Browns out of here.
Yeah.
As it is, I wouldn't want them back. I don't care what they've got record wise.
Yeah.
It's too
And the
much.
new stadium that they're talking about, if they moved it somewhere else, they're talking about a dome stadium, a retractable roof, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
So we'll see.
Well,
It's
I tell you what, in November, December, that's pretty brutal. In that when those winds come off of Lake Erie, we all know that's brutal.
yep. We'll
I
have
can
to
wait.
see it. I think that the stadium, the current stadium contract is up in what is it, 2028, Eric?
Yes, 2028. That's why they're trying to get uh, lay the framework for a new stadium if they decide to do that,
I'd
so
like to
they could
see it
actually
happen.
not
Well,
be
5 years
thrown to
built,
the.
5 years building a stadium would be about right.
That's about correct. So we'll
Hmm.
see. Hopefully they'll get something arranged. We're getting
On,
to
I
the we're getting about
hold
that
on.
time. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, we are. But are you a baseball fan at all, or
um,
basketball?
no, neither one. I go and watch them from time to time. Where I live, we've got a double A team of the Marlins, so we get to see minor league baseball. But no, I'm an NFL guy. I'm a pro
Oh,
football.
okay. I before we end, I just wanted to throw in this breaking news because I've been talking about it a lot
Okay.
in prior shows. Um, that Bally Sports has officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy,
Oh no.
which um, affects the a lot of teams, but especially the Guardians, the Reds, the Diamondbacks, and I forget one more team. But those teams are going to be taking their TV broadcasts will be taken over by MLB officially as of tonight, and though they will be most you can only watch them streamed, and eventually they're gonna go direct. Probably it seems go direct to consumer, which means you're gonna have to pay probably about 15 a month um for to watch the games.
I don't.
And
I won't be paying it.
yep, I won't either. Um, but even if they um that that'll be down the road, but they need to sign with a local cable network um, to in order to be broadcast on TV. Right now, they'll be free streaming it on MLB.TV for a short time. But I just wanted to let the viewers and listeners know about that because that's kind of important if you're a baseball or basketball fan. But anyway, thank you so much, Barry, for joining us.
He's got a little thing for the end. Remember,
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Go ahead with your little uh
With
idiom.
my idiom.
yeah.
Yeah, I want to leave you with a football idiom. Idioms are things that happen in life that really have nothing to do with what's going on, but yet we put words to it, like um, cold shoulder, where cold shoulder came from in life. You give somebody the cold shoulder, and we know what that means. That means that we're just not paying attention to them. Where that came from was back in medieval times. If you were a traveler and you came to my house or my castle and you were a great friend, I would give you a hot meal, and that's called a warm reception. If I give you a night to stay and I'm hoping that you'll leave, then I would serve you the shoulder part of the beast, and I would serve it to you cold. And that's why we call it a cold shoulder. Give somebody the cold shoulder. I'm wanting you to leave, even though you'll spend the night. So football idioms are just everywhere. I mean, a pancake is a breakfast food, but yet it's a football statistic. I'm going to give you how red zone got started. We know that red zone is from the 20 to the goal line. It's at each end. How this got started was in 1982, Joe Gibbs, after a game with the Washington Redskins, was talking to a reporter with the Washington Post. And three times he said, well, when we get to the red zone, I wasn't happy with what happened. And he went on and on. And finally, the reporter said, Coach Gibbs, wait, stop. What are you talking about, red zone? And Coach Chip said, well, I consider from the 20 to the goal line, I call that the red zone because it's the most important part of the field, offensively and defensively on both ends of the field. That got put in the Washington Post article. It just got repeated and repeated, and now it's just a standard part of football.
Funny how
Oh, wow.
stuff like that starts.
So that's my football idiom.
Well, let me thank you very much, Barry, for coming in. It's especially on the short notice. We do appreciate
Absolutely. It's the heyday of the free agency, and hopefully this next week the Browns will fill some needs like safety and wide receiver 3 and defensive line, and then we'll be onward and upward.
you, and hopefully you're always welcome back. If you want to come in, if you got something you want to announce or anything like that, just reach out to Erik and he'll
Yep.
get you scheduled in.
Anytime.
We do.
Sounds great. I
We do
appreciate you having me on.
Appreciate your time,
Okay.
sir.
Yeah, appreciate you coming in, Barry.
Wrap it up, Erik.
Okay. With that, as the saying goes, it's time to be like a hockey player and get the puck out of here.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Pittsburgh!